all?
No, the headphones are because I'm outside and people will walk by and wonder why. But the cat is named Mama because she had her kittens in my girlfriend's basement.
Oh.
And so the kids woke up one day and heard kittens in the basement, and they opened the door and was like, "Holy crap! There's kittens in the basement!"
Kittens everywhere. We had cats growing up, and I definitely we had stray cats that would give birth on our properties, and we were like, "Where are all these cats coming from?" And that explained it. So cats are wild, man. But yeah, how's it going? How are you?
Good. So me and Haas are here talking Buffalo Sabres hockey, and I think it's a bit easier now once we've got past that it matters this year, because for a while I think it was hard to talk about Sabres hockey,
Right.
But so first question, expansion draft.
I think this is obviously a hot topic in I think Vegas, the situation with Vegas and how they got good so fast. And
no, hang on, Seattle.
I know, I'm getting there, but I'm just saying so I think what's going on right now is everyone's kind of losing their mind, who are we going to protect, what are we going to do? And I think Vegas taught everyone a lesson because these GMs just lost their minds. I mean, so many bad deals were made with Vegas, just throwing high draft picks or overthinking the situation when, teams gave away good players. I mean, Vegas was given draft picks to take good players. With Florida botched the situation, giving Jonathan Marchessault and that whole situation. They gave away two players, Riley Smith and Jonathan Marchessault, who have proven to be good for Vegas. And I hope Kevin Adams, he obviously, this is one of the worries, is that the dude has no experience and he wasn't around. He was not around when Vegas was going on. So I hope that, the new hire and the assistant GM, is helping kind of guide him through that process, because teams just got butchered. And I don't think that the Sabres, we've all seen them for the last 10 years. They just haven't been playing good hockey for a long time. And so I don't understand the panic of oh no, we're going to lose a good player. They don't have enough good players to really worry about that.
Yeah. See, I look at it very differently. I think that from Buffalo's point of view, there's absolutely nothing to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to take a player that's worth about 33rd in the draft, or you could give them 33rd in the draft, but giving them a third round pick isn't going to change, their point of view. Whereas a team like Minnesota is going to lose a good player.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, from their point of view, I think Seattle will get a lot from Minnesota, like Vegas got a lot from Florida, just because there's more talent there. Right. And so my view is Seattle has two groups of teams. They're taking 18 young players, and they're taking 12 bad contracts. And if you're one of the bad, or one of the teams that's not giving up a bad contract, from the outside, it's going to look like you gave up a lot. Right. But you really didn't, because Florida thought that Riley Smith was a bad contract, but he wasn't. And that was Florida's problem with evaluated players, because if you look at the first half of the season, you could say, all these guys are bad.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas last month you say, well, all these guys are good. So So, well, my core belief is that the evaluation has to be more contextual than it currently is, because those things that the analytics kids show aren't contextual at all. So hopefully they value without context.
Right. In this stretch of hockey lately, that's been more interesting to watch, more entertaining, and just better hockey, kind of made the conversation more interesting, because I mean, before, guys like Tage Thompson, you're like, you really don't care if you lose to Tage Thompson. I personally still don't really care a ton. Like if Tage Thompson is the player you lose to the expansion draft, that's not a big loss, I don't think. Tage Thompson has shown potential, but I mean, he's going to be 24 years old when next season starts. And with years and years of trying to make the NHL, having NHL shots, being in the AHL where he, still wasn't really producing a whole lot, at some point you have to recognize this guy's never going to turn into much more than a bottom six guy. And I mean, those are important players, but again, those are replaceable players. Casey Middlestat.
Hold it. Before you go on, I think that's true for someone that's 5'10", but someone that's 6'6" doesn't get their coordination until he's 24 years old. So I personally think that Thompson is still coming.
Yeah, and there's certainly if ideally you want to wait that out, you want to have the opportunity to just kind of ride it until it either happens or it doesn't.
Right.
So you certainly would be giving up that chance to see, because I mean, Tage Thompson could turn into something that's that's worthwhile. He's got a wicked shot, and I mean,
his defense is really good.
Yeah, the problem is that when he's not doing those things, he seems like he doesn't really have a plan. It seems like he'll carry the puck up the ice, and it's either just I'm gonna lose the puck, or I'm gonna do a spin move and lose the puck that way. And he does seem to kind of meander a bit. And I mean, I think a part of that that's changed recently. And so I'm wondering if a part of that's been coaching, if just the offense wasn't really something that makes sense for him, that doesn't work for him. Because you see that with a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but you see that with several Sabres players at times, where you wonder if the lack of awareness is really just there's the system in place isn't giving them options to make plays. Because it's definitely changed recently. So that's one of those things where you have to take those stone cold mindsets that you've had for the last several years of Sabres hockey and realize hey, maybe that just was a coaching thing, and these guys look lost because there was no, they weren't being put in a situation where they can succeed. So yeah, I mean, but again, I'm willing to give that up, give up that small, I wouldn't say small chance, but not a great chance that Tage Thompson turns into anything huge. But I mean, a guy like Casey Middlestat was a guy that I think a year ago was every trade proposal from Sabres fans. He was just thrown in hey, let's throw Casey Middlestat in for a little boost in the value. And I think now he's a guy that you absolutely cannot afford to lose. He's definitely one of your locks. I mean, you've got Eichel, Reinhart, Middlestat, probably missing someone here for a fourth, absolutely Olofsson. Those are guys that you absolutely will be protecting. And
I don't know.
I think Olofsson's a weird guy for me and for Sabres fans, because he's producing and not a lot of Sabres players are producing, but I understand that there's also the view that outside of 5-on-5 hockey, he's not that useful. And
power play hockey.
Yeah, sorry. Outside of power play, good point, good call. Outside of power play hockey, he's not all that useful. But I mean, I think there's still a place for a guy like that. And I mean, power plays are important. That's you have to be able to take advantage of those situations. So when you're trying to look at this roster, you have to look at guys that is there any situation that they are producing in? And the answer with Olofsson is an absolute yes. Whereas there are some other guys, it's you're still waiting on that production to turn into anything.
Well, for me, Olofsson needs the right line mate.
Mm-hmm.
And he, like Reinhardt, defers too much to Eichel.
Right.
So when he's playing with Eichel, he just stands on the dot and waits for the puck to come. When he was playing with the center that they traded to Minnesota, they would pass the puck in front of the goaltender until one of them had an open net, which is something that I live for. There is currently no one on the Sabres that will do that with Olofsson.
Right.
And that's why I was very upset with the Minnesota trade last year, because you had a player that worked with Olofsson. You actually had two players, and one went to Edmonton and one went to Minnesota. Neither is producing there, but the three of them worked here because they each tried to move the goaltender. Do you have are you on a phone or are you on a web browser?
I'm on a laptop.
Can you open another tab and look at don't tell me the score, the yesterday's Rangers game, Sabres?
Yep.
I can't put it on the tape because they'll bounce us.
Oh, gotcha.
But look at the first goal against. It happens at about 30 seconds.
Pull up here. I love how NHL.com is not one of the early options when you pull up, when you like Google a score or whatever, which tells you, what you need to know about the NHL's relevance to the world at times.
Don't tell me the score is DT MTS.com.
You pull, okay. I was gonna say, because you can pull it up on like NHL, you can see the goals on there as well.
Right.
I'm just pulling it up. Oh my God. The Sabres don't exist on this. I haven't been perusing on this. I almost never use desktop for anything except for when I'm working. So like it's just an adventure. Like I feel like I'm not very technologically advanced right now, but I got it up now here. And you said which goal did you want to check out?
First goal. Basically, it's 2-on-4, and neither Middlestat nor Samuelson pick anybody out.
Took way too long. All right, first goal here. This is the Lafreniere goal. It makes it 1-0. So
yeah.
By Matthias Samuelson, number 54, the son of former NHL star Michelle Samuelson.
Yeah, that goal had some potential to turn into another Saberpede because you just see four guys skating back in the defensive zone, one guy on the puck carrier, and then the other guy's just doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, this is why when people, say that Middlestat's a lock, and that's probably true. I feel like,
Right.
because that play is intolerably bad.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, like, the Sabres, even guys guys like Middlestat that I think are must protect, they are still very incomplete players. And I think this stretch of hockey is going to be important, and how they translate that to next season, early season, is going to be very important, because Casey Middlestat's a guy that clearly lacked confidence. I mean, because the NHL game was too much for him early on in his time with the Sabres. And that was kind of what led, I think, a lot of us to think like, oh, well, he's not going to make it. Because, I think there's a bit of impatience sometimes, and it's fair to some extent, but Middlestat just wasn't producing. But now that he's kind of producing, he's more involved in successful hockey. This is that next level. This is that, like, you cannot take a play off like this. Otherwise it turns into a goal. And I mean, when they're competing, when, you're at this point next season and you're in the thick of things in the playoff race, which seems like an unrealistic thing, but you can kind of, just if they get to that point, those are the plays where we're all just, Twitter is alit with conversations about Casey Middlestat's play. But I mean, you're honestly, like, this is one of the few games I got to watch in full, and I didn't really like pay enough attention to catch that. So I appreciate you pointing that out. And I didn't see a lot of people talking a lot about it, but this is that next level for him.
Right. But the second goal is almost as bad. And
that one up.
Because they're in a defensive zone, and it ends up they're not covering anybody. And the defenseman finds the open man.
All right, here we go.
Fox. Now Filipino. Set up in front.
Oh boy, that is a set play for the Rangers that clearly worked, because Middlestat fell for it. I mean, that is coaching to a T right there.
Yeah.
Just a guy, he's in again, I don't want to go back to this too much, but coaching in the Sabres obviously is a huge part of this, because you wonder if an offensive system isn't working for you, if you're not going to understand what it looks like when an offensive system is working for another team. When a team's rotating the puck and you're not familiar with doing that yourself, you might get caught up in kind of the dust of it all a little bit, because he clearly just follows a guy that is no longer really a part of this play.
Right.
And his eyes, you see him following the player. It's almost like he's playing man defense in the NFL. He's like, that's my guy. I'm following him wherever he goes. And it's like, that's how you leave holes. He just leaves a whole open part of the ice there. And again, I mean, that's kind of the next level for a guy like Casey Middlestat. You hope that this conversation is happening, obviously, internally. You hope that the Sabres are having him in front of a film room saying, like, what in the world is going on here?
Yeah.
And then explaining to him, keep your zone there.
But I want to come back to that. The only thing I wanted to say about the expansion draft is that for me it's real unsatisfying, because you never know who got listed.
Mm-hmm.
We'll hear Thompson got picked or Borgen got picked, but we never see the list, which I find very unsatisfying.
And I remember with Vegas, there was a conversation that the list was going to be made public prior to, and then the NHL changed it kind of last second. And I understand the logic. Like, as a fan, I would love to see that. I'd love to see, and then kind of like you would have all these blogs and all these posts about, like, hey, like, we did our own expansion draft based on these lists, and that would be a lot more fun. But the defense is kind of the more interesting conversation for the Sabres, because Risto is everyone's favorite Sabre to say, like, we gotta get him, let him go. I agree for sure. That, like, I would like to see Risto move. It's one of those things where it's also been years and years of this. It's got to be weighing on him. It's got to be weighing on guys in the locker room, that, like, there's this guy there that clearly has been part of conversations for years now. But I have to imagine, regardless of all that there's some value in Rasmus Ristolainen out there, that someone is going to be willing, maybe not to give anything like of note. You're not going to get any, you're not going to throw him, give him for a first round pick or anything like that, maybe, but there's got to be some value there. So I'm inclined to want to protect him if he's still around. My ideal world is he's traded before the expansion draft. You have a deal in place with someone.
Oh yeah.
But
how is he going to be traded? Because everyone has this problem. And
Right.
People talk a lot about this on Sabres Space. I'm like, who's gonna take on Lithuania now? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, you'd have to find a team that is almost similar in the Sabres in that they don't have defensive players that like defensemen that they're all that interested in protecting. And I don't know that you're going to find that, especially because the 7-3-1 format's the most popular, and almost every team outside of Buffalo has at least 3 defensemen that they're like, this guy we can't lose.
Right.
Probably more. I mean, that's why Vegas thrived and took so many defensemen, because it's hard to follow the
cover
format
3.
and not lose a good defenseman.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a good point. You'd almost have to be willing to trade, risk, like look at a team that like trade a Risto situation for a Risto situation. Find a defenseman out there that a team like is on the edge of not protecting kind of thing, and then decide, hey, we're going to protect that player over. And then again, you're still exposing Will Borgen in that situation because you've got 2 in Dahlin and Yoki Haru that are definitely being protected regardless.
Well, then if you're trading Risto for a forward, then you have an extra forward out there. So you're definitely losing Thompson. So, I just don't see any trades happening before, except for maybe if Buffalo's not going to go forward with Allmark, they could take a goaltender in the trade.
Right.
But then Columbus, say, loses 2 players, one to Buffalo and one that the other team takes. So, why would they do that? So we'll see. But I don't find it very satisfying. What I want to get back to is the coaching and the current play, because lately they play Middlestat against the other team's best offensive players. Whereas I think if you're trying to win, you don't do that. So my theory is they've told the coach, either you're staying or you're going, but we want you to play Middlestat against Marchand's line because we're trying to learn something about Middlestat. Not that this will help you win, because I think it's a bad game plan.
And I mean, I don't as much as like, obviously like in the past, as you're familiar with, I was very pro, just losing at the end of the season, getting the best possible draft pick. I mean, I think it's kind of
cross that.
Yeah. Now it's one of those things where like that's a symptom. The draft position is just kind of a symptom of the rest of the season. Like if they lose and they put themselves in position for a high draft pick, it is probably a better situation. But I don't think that the team is necessarily said like, hey, we're okay with losses. But I think that they've definitely turned their attention the last, couple weeks here and going into the end of the season. It's definitely a developmental thing. I don't think they like the situation is you're trying to find out what positions you put these players in that is going to improve them and help you win games, maybe now, but mostly in the future. And I mean, I think a part of that, Granato comes from a developmental place. I mean, he's worked with the developmental team for a long time. And Adams, I mean, that's really the only experience he had prior to this was it was kind of developing through Harbor Center and everything like that. So I think that they're just trying to figure out what works with these kids and also what doesn't. I mean, they're going to put them in situations that they're probably going to fail, and they might put them in those positions for several games. Just to make it click, like, hey, like this is stuff that we, if you want to get to where you want to be as a player, we need you to be able to do this. So it's kind of like putting UPL in the game and saying like, they clearly didn't care if he failed in that situation. I mean, that's not the whole purpose of it. He could have got lit up and it still would have been a lesson of like, hey, this is what you're going to face when you get to where you want to be. And I think it's important to kind of see that. It's kind of akin to, how we see Quentin Byfield in LA. He's going to get a couple games here at the end of the year, putting your prospects in the game, for a couple years of games at the end of the year. And and maybe the expansion draft even plays into that. Maybe you're looking at like, we're putting Casey in these situations that we're going to need him to succeed in the future, and he's just not cutting it. And I don't think that they're going to leave Middlesex exposed, but maybe that's happening with other players who putting them in similar situations where they're not going to succeed. And if they're not, then maybe that does change your thinking the expansion draft a little bit.
But it's also true, but it's also true of Darlene and Jokaharu is they are playing against Marchand to see if they can.
Right.
So next question. The draft. I wish you would join my contest and do the cool name draft to see how that works for you.
What's this? I honestly don't know what the contest is here.
I've done a contest about the past 6-7 years. No one else plays. Lager has a couple of years, but you just put together your draft board and then you see who Buffalo, if it's Buffalo, or the article in the Darlene year. I went to other teams because everyone would take Eichel or Darlene. And it kind of gives you an indication whether Prineman is nuts or
right.
McKenzie is nuts, or what, and how my system relates to whether it works, and does Liger's methodology work, and it's good to keep track because everyone thinks that they can draft, so it's it's kind of nice to have a record of what you were saying at the time.
Right. Yeah. And I honestly, in past years, I do remember that I seeing this now, and I wish that I had engaged in past years, because this is the least. I started doing some this week, kind of like diving in and getting my hands in on prospects and stuff. I'm a pretty draft. I think it's a product of being a Bills and Sabres fan. Just the offseason being what matters every year, because the season itself never really matters. But I normally dive all the way in and know so many names, and then this year maybe it's because this draft is considered to be a little bit lesser. I haven't really dove in too much, but I did get in this week, and I think, like, I've been saying this. I hate the conversation about, oh, this is a bad draft. Like, do you really think that this is a year where I think that conversation is just because there isn't that number one or number two clear-cut guy, but you're not going to get a draft where like just the top 5 guys are exponentially worse than last year's top 5 guys. That just doesn't happen. It's not. Do you think that just there's this magical like birth year thing where, hey, the 2002 birth years are all of a sudden just not worthwhile players or whatever?
No. There's actually been years that have been terrible.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly happens, but I think those years, then you might look and you might see like, hey, we're getting a little more production from the guys that were taking, 15 to 20 or whatever, or you might have found a little more. This year will be interesting because of the situation we've had with COVID and everything. I do imagine we're going to kind of go back a little bit to where it was maybe 2 decades ago, when there was a little bit less information available on these guys. So you're going based off what you knew a year ago. And I mean, these kids are developing so much in a year that like there's so much that changed. So you hope that the evaluation process. I mean, that's a worrisome situation for the Sabres, who have a scouting department that is pretty thin, obviously notoriously right now. But I don't know. There's some kids. Liger is a tenacious guy, and I love just seeing him, every day kind of give his view on kind of a situation. I think things change a little less than like you might see within every like posting every day and saying, hey, we're seeing these, this from this guy. Things don't change that much from day to day, but I don't know. I've been following his lead a little bit and diving in, and I like some kids.
Yeah, I think the scouts tend to coalesce because at the beginning of this period, I believe each scout is less sure about their own opinions. But as Mackenzie starts putting out lists of combined scouts, they end up moving their evaluations toward what everyone else believes.
Right. Yeah. And maybe that's kind of why, like Mackenzie, because I think it's logical that Mackenzie's list would be the most accurate. Like we saw that. I don't know if you saw those charts where they showed like Mackenzie's rankings prior to the draft and where those players were actually taken, and it's almost always like pretty spot on within a few spots.
Yeah, but it's also bad.
Right. And I agree with what you're saying, and that kind of goes to a conversation that was being had that I saw about just how a GM might be more willing to take the consensus player. Like they might be in love with a guy that's really, he's viewed as 5, 6, 7 spots below where they're going to take him, and they want that guy, but they might be more willing to take the consensus guy there that they love a little less, because there's less risk in that. If that player busts years from now, everyone's like, well, everyone thought that it was, Sam Reinhart after Aaron Ekblad or whatever. No one thought that Leon Draisaitl was really there, was really the guy that you want. So there's much less risk, and job security obviously matters to these guys because, that's their livelihood. So I agree for sure that these guys, I mean, you see Mackenzie's list kind of evolve over time, and I think it might be because the GMs, maybe not the GMs, but the scouts and all these guys are seeing that and kind of falling more in love with the guys just because they're being talked into it a little bit.
Right.
And then, when you can go back to you get the scouts come together and the GM's like, all right, guys, what are we looking at here? What are we seeing? Hey, Dylan, do you still love, this player here? And they're like, maybe not as much anymore. I kind of agree with the consensus now. That certainly is a thing. And I think that probably happens. It's one of those things where we just groupthink kind of it creeps into everything we do. And we could obviously go into a much different path with the conversation about just how that all works and mob mentality and all that. But this year has been a little more interesting, I think, because it's all over the place. I mean, Matty Beniers is clearly like he's high on everyone's list, and Dylan Guenther is shooting up everyone's list. But then you have guys like Owen Power, who's won in a lot of places still, and he's 8, 9, 12 in a lot of places. Like it's kind of all over the place. And it's, I mean, because of the COVID situation we've seen.
But I'll show you mine if I can get my screen up here.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if there's anyone that you do love that's like kind of not really like in the mainstream conversation.
Well, I've only looked at 4 or 5 people because how do I get to try this one?
There you go. I see it.
Okay, so we're there. So this is my last decade of 17-year-olds, and Guenther's 11.
Right now, I only see a white screen right now.
Oh, you only see a white screen. You are screen sharing.
Let's see.
Maybe. No, not that one. Whiteboard Zoom. Can I lose this? Oh, let me try it again. Share screen. Not whiteboard. Google Chrome, not that one, but oh, there it is. That one.
Still loading on my end, but I'm sure it'll pop up here in a second. There it is. Yep, I see.
Yeah.
I see what we got here.
So I have Gunther at 11. Now, last year for the decade had a Rossi at 5, Byfield at 7, Jarvis at 10, and Stutzel at 17, Perfetti at 20, and Lafreniere at 21. So for me, last year was a fantastic draft. To have, 6, 7 guys in the top 20 for the decade. This year, as I said, I haven't done it everybody else because I wait until March 8th and then I can just do it once. But so this is 17-year-olds and 18-year-old or 16-year-olds will be very beneficial next year.
Right.
Hello. I haven't used this much yet, so it hasn't learned the JSON file yet. So it takes a while to load the JSON file. But my defensemen are notoriously bad, so I generally don't make an argument that power is bad. I just don't make an argument that it's good,
Right.
And I end up getting defensemen in my draft, but why are you not working? You're not working. So, there it is. So among 16-year-olds, Gunther is 16, but Hughes counted 3 times. So, so he's probably 14th for the decade as a 16-year-old. So I think he's going to be fine if Buffalo can get him. But but it's not like a deep year this year for me. And the 16-year-olds last year weren't particularly plentiful either. So I'm not really worried about missing the OHL kids because I think they all went to Europe anyway. But I haven't looked at it too deeply.
I'm gonna be curious to see Gunther's measurements come draft time because he's a kid that looks much bigger than he's listed. He plays a big, smooth game, and that's kind of my initial impression is just like how smooth he is, and he's a kid that knows that, like he plays like he knows that he's good, which I think is important. It's not necessarily as simple as confidence. He plays the game like he knows that he's good, that he can compete with anyone he's on the ice with.
Right.
And I think it kind of creates like a smooth game for him, and that's something that like immediately, like I don't know how many Dylans you can have in one team, but apparently you can have 2 Rakish, so you can have 2 Dylans as well. But it's one of those things where that's something that I look for in every player is like, do you know that you're good? Because that's going to help you when you get into training camp. And I mean, it's not necessarily like a cockiness thing in the way that you're moving, the way that you're playing. But if you skate with confidence and the puck's coming to you, you're trying to find the puck, like especially when you get to this level of the draft, when you're being drafted that high, chances are you're the best or top 2 or 3 player on the ice in every game you've played for a while there. So take advantage of that and do things that the top 3 best player on the ice should be doing consistently. And he does that. I mean, I can't say that I've sat there and watched a lot of games, every Dylan Guenther game, or I haven't seen a ton from him. But what I have seen is just that he plays with the smoothness and just the knowledge that he is there to be one of the best players every night. And so that is something that I loved about him. But I also he looks like he's playing bigger than he actually is. And obviously that, he's playing against some smaller kids at times, and maybe that'll change the second he walks, skates onto an NHL sheet for the first time. But it's just, that's one of those things that there's a lot of intrigue with that kid for sure.
So we talked about the coach some. Does he stay? Does he go?
When this change was made, I made a reference that bringing up Granato and having him be the interim coach, I assumed it was going to be unless this goes absolutely disastrously, I thought that he was probably going to get a chance to do it. He's got the experience of a guy, he's got experience that hey, this is a guy that could reasonably be an NHL coach. It's not like this is some guy that's he was a player for 3 years or 4 years or whatever, and then he was behind an NHL bench for 2 years, and now he's a head coach. He's been around the league, and he's been around different levels of hockey, so you do appreciate that. I am not convinced that the team has actually played all that well under him. It's been more entertaining. It's been hockey you can watch, but it's also, you've seen some of the younger guys kind of thrive. But you have to ask, are these things that you could also have happen under a new coach while also finding more success? And I think the answer to that is definitely yes. So I hope, and I like the report that Adams is being thorough. None of us know what really goes into coaching hockey. And I mean, I don't want to assume that you haven't been an NHL coach, but obviously I've never seen you behind a bench. So none of us really know. So I can't sit there and say oh, I'm going to throw my hands in the air and be angry if I hear Don Granato loses the interim tag and becomes the NHL coach of the Sabres. But I also kind of think it might be time to especially if Rutherford comes in, bring in another, experienced voice that can just kind of set the rule and just say guys, this is what we're doing. This is the system that I've got. We're all going to learn it, and we're all going to, we're going to do it. Granato probably hasn't really set a system in place. And so I don't think that could be part of why the success hasn't been there, is because, you have a very small portion of a shortened season. Are you really going to have the time to put in a whole new system and teach kids a whole new way of playing hockey in that short time? So that's going to be the conversation that when Granato sits down with Adams has to be asking those questions, what's your system? Why do you think that's going to work alternatively to what they've been doing already? I don't think that Granato is the answer, in my extremely uneducated opinion. But I won't be disappointed. It will fester in the back of my mind that maybe this is another point of the Pegulas being a little cheap. And I not to borrow from someone else too much, but Tim Graham made a really good point that he has thought from the beginning that Granato makes sense, because then the Pegulas and Adams can be oh, we had the right idea all along. We had the guys, the pieces in place. We weren't wrong. It was just Ralph Kruger that was wrong. And now we kind of promote from within, and hey, look at this. We've got our guy, and we had him all along, and we were never wrong. And I don't know that Adams is that type of guy. I do think that there's a chance that the Pegulas have kind of had that, because they have to save face a little bit with the Sabres for sure, because I think a good majority of the fan base is well and ready to see them to sell the team. It's not going to happen. They're the owners of the Sabres, and they're going to be the owners of the Sabres. But I just, a part of me just almost wants Granato not to be the answer, because I don't want that in my mind that oh, is this just a cop-out situation kind of thing? But I mean, maybe it is a cop-out, and then it also works out, and then they were onto something all along with Granato. So my guess is probably not. Who do you have your eyes on anyone, or are you thinking Granato is the answer here?
I think, as I said before, since they are testing players, they've told them either way.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be either way, but he knows,
Right.
I think my belief is that he will go for a star, meaning Pagula.
Mm-hmm.
And that star may be many people, but I don't think that is the current coach.
Yeah. Right.
But my knowledge past that isn't as, or my guts past that isn't as good as, any more in depth than that.
Right.
So.
And that's kind of how I feel, is that I don't know the NHL coaching landscape enough. Right. I do think that bringing in an assistant GM that is into analytics and everything like that could point to a guy like Boudreau, who is also known to kind of be involved, or at least open in that side of the side of things. I think that could be a match that makes a lot of sense. And that's, hockey coaching is different. Like in the NHL, if you've had 4 jobs coaching already and you're not winning championships, you're not getting another job. But hockey coaching is an entirely different thing, obviously. So that's why it's hard to be like, oh, well, I don't want another retread. I would like to try something new, maybe, but maybe that new is something that someone else is old that just, that hasn't really clicked somewhere. But Boudreau seems to be a popular one. I love Gerard Gallant just because I was super entertained. Like, Vegas played an entertaining brand of hockey in that year. They went to the Stanley Cup Finals early. I don't know how much you're falling in love with that 1 year. Like, if I'm just stuck to that 1 year, because Vegas moved on so quickly from him.
Right.
It was shocking to see. Florida, same way. The sudden nature of his departure, and everyone saw the pictures of him at the airport and everything like that. And it's just, you wonder if there's some issues there, but that's obviously hashed out hopefully in the interview process. But I do like Gerard Gallant. I think. I don't know, but I don't know a ton about. I don't know if he's a big analytics guy.
Yeah. So what's the interview question that you give him?
So I think with Gallant, you have to ask. I love interview situations that are a little bit off, but I would honestly why did we all see these pictures of you at the airport? What was the situation that the team? Because it was clearly a situation of disrespect. They clearly did not respect him enough that situation happened. So what happened? Just give me the story of what led to that. And then also, you probably want to ask him. Vegas has found a lot of success. They're maybe the best team in hockey right now, even without him. So the thought was, I think, a lot that they're being coached up. This is a ragtag group of players coming from all different situations coming together. And that was kind of the assumption. It's oh, well, they found success and all that. You might have that with the Sabres. There might be a lot of turnover. There also might not. There's some reason to think that they might not make a ton of changes because they are very young. So this would kind of be his first opportunity to coach a team that isn't just a bunch of stuff, kind of pieces thrown together. So you have to ask him, Vegas found success without you. Were you kind of the jump starter to that? Or was it just a situation where they just got a lot of good players in that expansion draft, because they clearly did. So yeah, I would definitely, those are kind of you have to cover those situations. Why both of these teams, why was it a pretty sudden situation? Because I don't think anyone saw him getting fired in Vegas. They were obviously underachieving a little bit at that time. But no one saw that coming. I was shocked, and he immediately went to number 1 on Seattle's list. And that's another factor, is Seattle's gonna be looking for a coach, and that's a whole new situation. That's probably an appealing situation for a coach, because there's probably some security there. Obviously, Gallant didn't get the security that he probably deserved in Vegas. But Seattle isn't. I don't think they're gonna be hey, we're gonna bring you in for 2 years and ask you even if we suck. That's so that's another factor here is, you know, you have a very appealing job probably that's going to be competing with what you've got. And Buffalo still isn't all that appealing of a job. But there are also only 32 of them now. So I don't know. The coaching search is going to be a really big moment for the Pagulas, I think. And none of us are going to know what the answer is or what their answer means really. Because like they might hire Granato and we're all like, oh, well, this is the cop out. Well, maybe it really isn't. Maybe Granato actually just aced it in those interviews and they love what he's doing with the team. Or maybe they bring in Boudreaux and like, oh, this is them going for the name, you know, the Rex Ryan, like this is them just trying to appease us with, you know, the pacifier of an experienced coach. But maybe it's also Bruce Boudreaux is qualified and deserves this job. So I don't know. It's going to be a really interesting hiring process, more than really they've had in a while, I think.
So we are about 25% through my notes. But I'm worried that Zoom cuts us off because I believe that they start cutting off fairly soon. We've been on.
Yeah, I think there's a definite limit.
Yeah. So there's one thing I wanted to get to definitely was, you believe that war films are propaganda. And you were saying The Dark Knight was a great film, or was that someone else saying that?
I think that was someone else on that one. I do believe that a good majority of war films, and I mean even Marvel movies too, are another one.
That's what I want to get to, is that how can you look at war films different than Marvel movies? And you know, but if you didn't say that, it must have been someone else. And
I didn't say The Dark Knight. I don't remember that conversation. I do remember just kind of like the one moment on like the war propaganda. I mean, I think sometimes it's unintentional because it is like a, you know, it is your country or whatever, you know, if you're producing a movie for your own country, like there's going to be that. I don't know how familiar you are if you've watched Marvel. Sometimes it's fairly obvious. But I've also seen some pretty interesting, like I don't want to get too deep into this because it's not like I've done the research, but I've seen people talk about like Black Panther, even about how kind of the unsung hero of that movie is the white man, is the guy. I don't know if you've seen the movie. It's a long thing, but I mean, it's an interesting conversation. And I think that media, like all forms of media, are used for that. I mean, in governments and even arms of the military, like they actually do, they get contracts for these movies. Because if they're using like the you know, you're using the army or whatever, you're using the Marines in your movie, there's a contract there that they have. So they have say in the editorial content of that movie.
Yeah. Well, further than that, they will loan you a helicopter.
Right. Yeah.
So every movie becomes a movie that the military has approved, because you can either send them a script or not get a helicopter. And you know, now I think there's a director out there that's a difficult call.
Right.
You know, because you really want the helicopter, you know. So I just thought you said something praising Dark Knight, and I was like, oh, same guy.
I might have, like, and the thing is I might have actually said, because I do think The Dark Knight is a very, very good movie, but I also do want to note that, like, you know, like this, obviously, propaganda movies can still be very entertaining, can have a ton of, you know, so that's kind of where that is. And some movies do a better job at kind of being more subtle about, you know, hey, this is propaganda. You know, it might not be in the forefront of your mind, and then someone points it out, and you're like, oh, you're right, I missed all of that. Like, you know, so maybe that's why The Dark Knight is so entertaining, because they do a good job like hiding those subtle messages and everything like that. I like I always like the jokes about, like, the Batman's literally about a rich white man who's like who was targeting and abusing like mentally ill people, because I mean you know the Joker, that's kind of the whole thing there. But yeah, no, I mean there's an interesting conversation to be had. I think when you're aware of it, you can kind of be more entertained by it, because if you're aware and you're processing that information, you're like, all right, well, that's a little ridiculous. That's, you know, clearly some propaganda there. It allows you to have a little more, you know, to be consciously entertained kind of thing. So.
Right. What else do I want to talk about? Did you see my 5-on-5 chart?
I don't think I have.
Well, let me
my
pull
return
it
to
up.
cyberspace has been I'm not like super like, I just kind of like check the conversations that I've been having and then hop
Let
out.
me pull it up. How do I do that again? I just did that. I hit screen share first. And then it comes to this one. Okay, you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is the difficulty of opponent that I do by the other team's forwards that you play, the amount of time they spent on the power play. And this is on ice 5x5 goals against per 60. And this is Boston. And what I find really interesting about this is that the line goes more or less this way.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that the line would go this way because the teams that play against or the players that play against the other team's Marchand, and Boston plays Marchand against the other team's best player, is that they wouldn't be able to defend as well as the guys that play more against the third and fourth line. That that part of the penalty for playing against the good guys is that the other team's good guys score more.
Right.
So I always thought that this line would go this way.
Yeah, no, I honestly like, I wish I had like kind of like seen this before, because I could like kind of dive into it a little more. But I mean, that is, I logically that is how it would follow. Sorry, I'm like also like half blind and just trying to like look through all these names here.
You can pull this up on Sabrespace if you wanted to. You can probably
I can see it well enough here. I'm just.
Oh, okay.
So I guess I'm trying to kind of follow here. So this is oh, okay, I see. So this kind of is indicating, so can you kind of explain a little more, like what is this indicating?
The difficulty of opponent is your the players that you play against, how much power play time you get. So so if you're Buffalo, we'll look at this is new, I think. Yeah, because Samuelson is here.
Samuelson,
Yeah. And Borgen's at about 10 here. This is 6, so he's way off the chart, as is the other new guy who they decide to test. So he had a very difficult opponent day in his one day. But as you see, this chart pretty much goes like this, and players like Oposo, who play against the other team's best offensive players, also have a low on ice 5.5 goals against per 60, which is different than I expected. I expected the players playing more against Marchand would be up here, that this line would be this way.
Right.
But so what this chart shows to me is that the other team scores not because Oposo's on the ice, but because Irwin's on the ice. And even though they hide Irwin and only play him against the weaker opponents when they can, he still gives up a lot more goals than Oposo does on a per 60 basis.
Yeah, so I guess like this is kind of a good way to weed out like who is truly just bogging down the team. Because I mean, some of these guys, like, you know, you see, you know, in the middle here, that's logical. I mean, that's kind of but then you see the Irwins, you see now obviously Samuelson, I don't want to get too down on seeing that he's not playing against the best opponents and he's still giving up a ton, because you know it's early in his time.
Right, you know, this is only 3 games, and you know, so I'm not that worried up about that, you know.
Right.
You know, but Skinner has a reputation that he can't play defense, and they hid him, but he also didn't give up any goals.
Right.
You know, so I, you know, one thing that Taro talked about is a lot of the players up here have short-handed goals, because I showed this one. This chart is just the new coach, and so I did the same thing about a month ago, and you know. A lot of the players in this area were giving up empty net goals. You know, there's Reinhardt, there's Hall, there's Millstat, there's Darlene, and that sort of player gives up, you know, empty net goals. And for Darlene, I figured that there were 8 empty net goals of his, I think 36 at the time. So that ought to be about here, but it's still too high.
Right.
You know, and he's definitely playing better since a change of coach. This is both coaches up to the amount, you know, and now he's in a reasonable area, so things are better, you know.
Right, and it also seems like looking at Skinner's position and kind of on both those charts that they've kind of figured out that like he's almost. I wonder if there's a sense that he's just not all that playable, because I mean they're not playing him against the best opposition. He's not giving up a ton, but that's also limiting him minutes for a guy that is making, you know, $9 million and is supposed to be producing for you and everything like that.
But yeah, well, I think he falls into my theory that they are testing Thompson right now, and they are testing, Asplund, and they don't need to test Skinner, and whether he and Reinhardt give up, Reinhardt and Olsen give up a goal or not. I don't think they care because, they know what they got, but someone like Asplund has awesome numbers all year. Do I have it? I have it on.
And he's a guy we didn't even get to on the expansion draft conversation, but he's a guy that I also feel you're absolutely trying to find a way to protect him.
Definitely.
I would definitely protect him over Thompson. If that conversation happens, I mean, I gotta imagine the team feels the same way. I've definitely liked his game a ton, and I think that there's a pretty good chance that he's we've thrown a lot of players in that bottom 6 spot trying to just figure out what works, and I'm getting the feeling that he's kind of what works.
Can I move this? I can move this. So Asplund's points are 210 per 60 and 5-on-5, which is real good. He leads the team. His on ice goals against are really good. The guys that he plays against really hard. So I think I'd save Asplund before Middlestat, but you have enough to save both, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, right. I think both those guys are getting saved.
But
Borgen is the guy that we didn't get to talk a lot about with the expanded draft, and I think you'd want to keep him, but I also it's worth noting Borgen's played 10 NHL games. I don't know that Seattle, is Seattle going to see this potential that we all claim, we all think we see with this bigger defenseman that moves well? Is Seattle are they going to look at someone else? Are they going to look at Borgen as kind of one of their prospects? I mean, they're going to take some young guys that are essentially prospects still at this point, because you have to kind of fill out the future as well. But I also don't know that I don't want to lose him. Obviously, you don't really want to lose any of these guys on the edge there, but if you lose Borgen again, is that really that big of a tragedy in the expansion draft? Now, I mean, there's risk in looking foolish in that, because I mean, we mentioned some teams look foolish. Do the Sabres end up looking foolish if Borgen goes out there and solidifies himself as a top 4 defenseman, for an extended period of time? There's that.
I think I'm done.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No, I appreciate the conversation. It's been a lot of fun.
No, it has been a lot of fun. I'll save the rest of the questions for next time.
All right. Hey, well, you enjoy the rest of your day, and obviously, a lot of interesting stuff going on in Sabres land right now.
Yep. All right.
All right. Have a good one.
Take care, Huss.